Imagine this for a second. More than 100,000 people inside the Estadio Azteca. Flags everywhere. A home crowd roaring for Mexico. A final on the biggest stage in the country. And yet, most football fans have never heard of it. Not because it did not happen, but because history almost chose to ignore it. This is the story of the forgotten 1971 Women's World Cup in Mexico. A tournament played 20 years before the first official FIFA Women's World Cup in 1991, and one that FIFA now describes as a precursor to the modern tournament. To understand why this story matters, you have to understand the world women footballers were living in at the time. In many countries, women's football was treated as a joke, or worse, as something that should not exist at all. In England, the Football Association's notorious 1921 ban had blocked women from playing on affiliated grounds for decades, and that ban was only rescinded in January 1970. Even after that, the game was still treated as secondary, unofficial, and easy to dismiss. So when women's teams began building international competition anyway, they were doing it in a world that had never really made room for them. Then came Mexico in 1971. The country had just hosted the Men's World Cup the year before, and the Azteca was already one of football's great cathedrals. Promoters in Mexico saw that women's football could fill stadiums too, and they did not think small. This was not some hidden event on a secondary field. It was staged in major venues, pushed to the public, and sold with all the energy of a major football spectacle. 6 teams took part: Mexico, Argentina, England, France, Italy, and Denmark. For a moment, women's football was not being squeezed into the margins. It was placed right in the center of the show, and the public responded. Big time. Big time. The opening match between Mexico and Argentina reportedly drew around 100,000 people. Another Mexico match against England drew a massive crowd as well, often reported around the 90. Think about that. These were numbers that many men's internationals would envy, and they were happening in 1971, in a women's tournament that the official football establishment would later leave in the shadows. This is one of the reasons the tournament feels almost unreal today. It does not fit the story. Many people were taught about women as football slowly crawling into relevance. In Mexico, the relevance was already there. The world just failed to remember it. Mexico quickly became the emotional center of the tournament. The home team was talented, charismatic, and backed by a crowd that embraced them with a kind of energy women's football rarely received anywhere else. One of the faces of that era was Alicia Vargas, one of the stars of Mexican women's football, a symbol of how much quality and personality this tournament actually had. The players were not just participating in a novelty, they were becoming national figures. At least for that moment. They were on the front pages. They were watched. They were celebrated. And for a brief time, it looked like women's football had already broken through. But every great tournament needs tension, and this one had plenty of it. Denmark arrived with pedigree, having already won the previous independent world tournament in Italy in 1970. They were strong, organized, and dangerous. England's team, later remembered as the Lost Lionesses, also carried the energy of rebellion because they were representing their country in a football culture that still treated women players as outsiders. France and Italy were part of a broader European movement that had begun rebuilding the women's game despite years of neglect. So this tournament was more than a set of men. It was a meeting point for pioneers from countries where women had spent years fighting simply to be allowed on the pitch. The atmosphere in Mexico made the whole thing feel even bigger. The event was promoted with the kind of spectacle football authorities often claimed. Women's football could never attract. There were marketing gimmicks, bright presentation choices, and a full entertainment machine around the games. Some of that promotion was patronizing, even cliché-filled, but the crowds made one thing clear. People were not only curious, they were invested. Fans came because football is football when the competition feels real, the stakes feel high, and the players give them something to believe in. The tournament may have been unofficial, but the passion around it was completely real. Then came the final. Mexico versus Denmark, host nation versus defending champions. The Azteca was packed again, with contemporary reports put in the attendance at roughly 110,000, and some later reports placing it even higher.